When Peter Boyle played a factory worker who hated hippies in a movie in 1970, it made him a lot of money and fame. But something went very wrong. People cheered when his character attacked hippies, they loved his racist rants, they thought his violent character was a hero. But he never wanted to play that part. It scared him so much that he refused to ever play a violent character again. His family is still dealing with the shocking fallout today. Peter Boyle was born on October 18, 1935, in Norristown, Pennsylvania. Francis Xavier Boyle, Beau's father, was a famous TV personality in Philadelphia from 1951 to 1963. He hosted a Western-themed kids show called Chuckwagon Pete and later ran an after-school show called Uncle Pete Presents The Little Rascals. On that show, he introduced kids to classic comedy shorts like The Three Stooges and The Little Rascals. He also appeared on Ernie Cack's morning show on WPTZ, which is now KYW-TV. Beau's family was a mix of Irish, French, English, and Scottish descent. He grew up in a strict Catholic home with both religious discipline and the influence of entertainment. He was the youngest of 3 children and had 2 older sisters, Alice and Sydney. When he was a child, his family moved to Philadelphia, where he went to West Philadelphia Catholic High School for boys. His early years were shaped more by faith and structure than by his dreams of becoming an actor. After graduating in 1953, he made a choice that changed his life forever. He joined the De Salle Brothers, a Catholic teaching order for education. He lived in their house of studies for 3 years while getting his Bachelor of Arts degree at Lal University in Philadelphia. By 1957, he was done with school. But he no longer felt called to religious life. The strict rules and expectations of monastic life were too much for him, and he knew he needed something different. Boyle's departure from the monastery was a turning point. For years, he thought his future lay in religious service, but now that it was over, he was lost for a while trying to figure out what to do next. Eventually, he found his calling in acting. He moved to New York City and enrolled at HB Studio to study under the famous Utah Han. Han's classes were based on realism and emotional depth, pushing actors to find truth in their performances. It was a perfect fit for Boyle, who had spent years learning discipline and self-reflection. Life in New York wasn't easy for Boyle. He didn't have a steady income, so he worked as a postal clerk during the day and as a waiter and bouncer at night. He even worked as a cameraman for Florence Hanford's cooking show on TV. Each job gave him a new perspective. He watched people, studied how they behaved, and remembered those details for future roles. He became deeply aware of the struggles of everyday working-class life, and that awareness would later shape his acting style. Despite having trouble with money, Boyle was determined, and he started getting small stage roles. One of his first big breaks came when he was cast in The Odd Couple. His first movie role was in a drama directed by Sidney Lumet in 1966. But it was enough to keep him going. He was learning the craft, building experience, and proving to himself that this was where he belonged. In the late 1960s, he took another big step forward when he joined the Second City, a famous improvised comedy troupe in Chicago. The group was known for combining sharp humor with social and political commentary, and Boyle thrived in that setting, while figuring out their careers, relationships, and the strict expectations of the 1930s. Beau's part was small, but working on such a big production gave him a first-hand look at Hollywood. The movie had a strong ensemble cast including Candice Bergen and Joan Hackett, and it dealt with gender roles and class struggles. For Boyle, this was just the start. He wasn't a well-known name yet, but he was already taking on projects that had something to say. 2 years later, in 1968, Boyle got his first credited role as the Virgin President, a political satire directed by Graham Ferguson. It was about a naive president who was easily manipulated by those around him, which had terrible results. Beau's performance as the strict but slightly silly general gave the story both weight and humor. The movie wasn't a big hit, but it was part of a growing movement of films that questioned authority and the political landscape. Boyle was already drawn to roles that pushed the limits, and this one did the same. It was one of his first chances to explore that side of his craft. In 1969, he had another small but memorable part in Haskell Wexler's groundbreaking film Medium Cool. Boyle played a gun clinic manager in a story that blurred the line between fiction and reality. The film was set in Chicago during the chaotic events surrounding the 1968 Democratic National Convention, and real footage of protests was woven into the story. It was a brave and innovative project that looked at media ethics and the growing gap between journalism and truth. Although Bo's part was short, the movie was one of the most talked about of the year. That same year, he was in The Monitors, a satirical sci-fi story about a world where aliens had taken over and kept the peace through strict surveillance and absolute authority. Boyle played a production manager in the movie, which mixed dystopian themes with dark humor to reflect the worries of the time about the Cold War. While The Monitors didn't do very well, it gave Boyle another chance to try something new. Before Joe came out in 1970, Peter Boyle was just another struggling actor. He had small parts on TV and in movies, but nothing that made him stand out. That changed when he got the lead role in Joe, a low-budget drama directed by John G. Ailson. The movie only cost $116,000 to make, but it shocked everyone by making over $19 million, $3 million in the US, making it the 13th highest-grossing movie of the year, which is pretty rare for an independent film. But Joe was more than just a financial success. It struck a chord with audiences. Some saw it as a dark reflection of America at the time, while others saw something much more troubling. Boyle played angry factory worker Joe Curran, who hated hippies, liberals, and everything else about the changing culture of the late 1960s. Curran wasn't just an angry man, he represented a growing part of America that felt left. Boyle almost didn't take the part because it was so controversial. But Norman Wexler's screenplay felt sharp and real. Boyle knew that the movie wasn't just about one man's racism, it was about a generation's fear and frustration. His performance was so intense that people couldn't look away. He didn't play Joe as a one-note villain. Instead, he made him feel like a real person, which made the character even more disturbing. The movie follows Joe as he becomes friends with a rich man named Bill Compton. At first, the two men don't seem to be related at all, but as they talk, their shared prejudices bring them closer, which leads to one of the most shocking endings of any movie from that time. Joe and Bill go on a violent rampage at a hippie commune. By the time Bill realizes he's killed his own daughter without meaning to, it's too late. The movie ends on that heartbreaking note, leaving viewers stunned. But what happened next was something Boyle never expected. Viewers didn't just watch Joe, they watched the movie. It was supposed to be a critique of hatred and violence, but some people didn't see it that way. For example, construction workers and conservative groups cheered when Joe went on a rant and attacked hippies and liberals. Instead of being upset, they felt validated. Boyle was horrified. He had taken on the role to challenge audiences, not to give them a hero. Seeing people praise Joe's actions made him rethink his career choices. He refused to take roles that glorify violence, or he didn't want to play another character who could be misunderstood, which is why he turned down the lead role in The French Connection in 1971, which went to Jay Hackman. In The Candidate, which came out in 1972, he played Marvin Lucas, a political consultant who knew how to turn a nobody into a polished politician. Robert Redford's character, Bill Mackay, starts out as an idealist who doesn't care about winning, he just wants to say what he thinks. But Lucas knows that won't work, so he slowly changes Mackay. Boyle plays Lucas with quiet confidence. Lucas isn't a bad guy or corrupt, he just knows how the game works, which is what makes him so unsettling. By the time Mackay wins the election, Lucas barely recognizes himself. The film's sharp satire shows how politics turns people into products, and Boyle is at the center of it. The film won an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay, and Boyle's performance was praised. One big reason why it still seems important after only a year is that, of its success, Boyle played a very different type of manipulator in Friends of Eddie Coyle, 1973. He was Dylan, a bartender who seemed friendly but had dangerous secrets. Robert Mitchum played Eddie Coyle, a small-time gun runner trying to stay out of jail. Eddie thought Dylan was someone he could trust, but Dylan was actually an informant who was quietly giving information to the police while acting like Eddie's friend. Boyle didn't play Dylan as an obvious traitor. He was warm, easygoing, and always listening, which made Eddie's betrayal hurt even more when Dylan turned out to be Dylan. When Boyle finally figures out what's going on, it's too late. His performance was subtle but powerful, perfectly capturing the harsh, unforgiving world of Boston's criminal underworld. In Young Frankenstein 1974, He did something completely different. He played the monster, but not in the way anyone thought he would. Most of the role was silent, but both Bo and the monster made every movement count. The monster wasn't just scary, he was lovable. That scene with Boyle standing on stage with Gene Wilder in a tuxedo and grunting his way through putting on the Ritz was one of the funniest parts of the movie. The movie was a huge hit, and Boyle proved he could do comedy just as well as drama. By 1976, he was back to playing characters who felt like they'd lived 1,000 lives. In Taxi Driver, he played Wizard, an old cab driver who tried to give advice but never really said anything useful. Robert De Niro played Travis. He'd been in the job too long and seen too much, so Wizard didn't have much to offer. He just talked about life, made jokes, and shrugged off serious questions. Boyle made him feel completely natural, like someone you'd meet in a late-night diner talking just to fill the silence. The movie was dark and unsettling, a portrait of a city on the edge, and Boyle added to that feeling of loneliness. His scenes weren't long, but they stuck with you. Then came Hardcore 1979, where Boyle played Andy Mass. In the seedy world of California's underground porn industry, Mast was hired to find a missing girl. George C. Scott played the desperate father looking for his daughter, and Mast was supposed to help, but Mast wasn't a hero. He was sleazy, cynical, and at ease in the filth. Boyle played him with a mix of humor and menace. He made you laugh, but also felt uneasy. He wasn't evil. He was just someone who had stopped asking questions. His back and forth with Scott added tension to an already dark story, making it clear that Mast wasn't a hero. In 1981, he moved into science fiction with Outland, a suspenseful thriller set on one of Jupiter's moons. The movie was directed by Peter Hams and was often called High Noon in Space because it borrowed themes from classic westerns. Boyle played Shepard, the dishonest leader of a mining colony who was also running a drug smuggling ring. The miners were given amphetamines to make them more productive, but the drugs had a scary side effect over time. They caused psychosis. Shepard didn't care that workers were dying. He kept the operation going by staying in the shadows while they died. This made him the perfect bad guy for Sean Connery's character, Marshal William O'Neill, who was determined to bring justice to the colony. Boyle played Shepard as a quiet menace, never raising his voice but always making it clear that he was in charge. The film had a gritty industrial look that was influenced by Aliens 1979, and while it didn't get much praise when it came out, it slowly gained a cult following. Following people came to appreciate its unique mix of genres. And Bo's performance was a big part of why it worked. After playing a cold and cunning bad guy, Bo switched things up with comedy in 1983. He played Moon in Yellowbeard, a pirate parody co-written by Graham Chapman of Monty Python. The film was chaotic, both in terms of its plot and its production. Critics thought the humor was uneven and audiences agreed. Boyle stood out by playing his part with a steady, grounded energy, while the rest of the cast went crazy. This contrast gave his performance a subtle humor that worked well even though the movie itself didn't. He returned to comedy in 1984 with Johnny Dangerously, a spoof of old gangster movies starring Michael Keaton in the title role. The movie relied heavily on slapstick and exaggerated crime film cliches. Boyle played Judunde, a mob boss who was both scary and silly at the same time. The movie didn't get the best reviews at the time, but it has a loyal following over the years, especially among Keaton fans of his early work. Boyle's performance was another example of how well he could balance comedy and drama, giving a character just the right amount of weight without making things too serious. In 1986, he had the rare chance to lead a TV show about a New York City beat cop who was about to retire. Most police dramas were about action or big investigations. But Joe Bash was different. It was about a man nearing the end of his career, his loneliness, his daily routine, and the quiet struggles he faced. The show mixed comedy and drama in a way that felt ahead of its time, and Boyle gave a performance full of depth and subtlety. Critics loved it, but viewers didn't connect with it, and it was canceled after only 6 episodes. Even though it was short-lived, it showed Bo's ability to carry a story that didn't fit into any one category. Peter Bo's guest role in the X-Files episode Clyde Brookman's Final Repose. In 1995, one of the most famous moments in Bo's career happened when he played Clyde Brookman, a life insurance salesman who had the strange ability to see people's deaths coming. Bo's nuanced performance brought a mix of dark humor, melancholy, and humanity to the character, making it one of the best episodes of the show. Written by Darren Morgan, the episode combined supernatural elements with emotional depth, and Bo's portrayal earned him praise from critics. It was so good that it won him an Emmy Award. Peter Boyle won his only Emmy for Outstanding Guest Actor in a Drama Series in 1996, even though he was nominated multiple times throughout his career. His path to playing Frank Barron on Everybody Loves Raymond began in complete chaos in 1996. Boyle was already a respected actor, known for roles like Young Frankenstein and Taxi Driver, but sitcoms were a whole different ballgame. When he got the audition for CBS's new comedy, he didn't expect it to become one of the most important moments in his career, and he definitely didn't expect to almost miss it. At the time of the audition, Boyle lived in Manhattan but flew to Los Angeles with his family. What should have been an easy trip turned into a logistical nightmare. First, studio security wouldn't let him in, and when he finally got through the gate, he couldn't find a parking spot. To make matters worse, he ended up at the wrong building, and by the time he figured out where he was supposed to be, he was late, tired, and very angry. But it turned out that anger is what got him the part. There was no hiding the fact that Frank Barron was a grumpy old man who didn't hold back his opinions, and Boyle unintentionally brought that energy into the audition room. He wasn't putting on a show, he was genuinely annoyed. Phil Rosenthal, the creator of the show, later said, "He came in all hot and angry. I hired him because I was afraid of him." That wasn't a joke. Rosenthal and star Ray Romano knew right away that this was Frank Barron. He had played intense, dramatic, violent, and complex characters, but he had also done comedic roles. The producers saw something special in him, a guy who could be tough and gruff, but also funny and, when needed, surprisingly warm. His timing was perfect, his delivery was sharp, and he could make even the simplest line hilarious. They didn't even need him to read a script. Meeting him was enough to know he was the right person for the job. That crazy morning changed Bo's career. He officially joined the cast in 1996 and took on a role. Frank Barron wasn't just another sitcom dad. He was rude, sarcastic, and politically incorrect, but lovable all at the same time. Boyle made sure that Frank wasn't a one-note character. Beneath the groans and eye rolls, he gave him depth. There were moments of vulnerability, real emotion, and a kind of old-school toughness that made him more than just the punchline of a joke. Over the course of Everybody Loves Raymond's 210 episodes, Boyle became an important part of the show's success, and his chemistry with Doris fans thought Roberts and Garrett, who played Boyle's tall son Robert, were really married because of how real their fights seemed. The back and forth between Boyle and Garrett, who played his son Robert, became one of the show's comic highlights. Garrett's performance earned him 7 Primetime Emmy nominations for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series from 1999 to 2005, but he never won. He was the only main cast member of the show to leave without an Emmy. After having a heart attack on set in 1999, Boyle took his role very seriously, even when life got hard. Many actors would have quit, but Boyle went back to work as soon as he could because he knew how important Frank was to the show and to the fans. He never let his health problems affect his performance, and it showed in every scene, whether he was making fun of his wife Marie or giving his son Ray bad advice. Boyle made Frank feel real, and that was his most famous thing. His catchphrase, "Holy crap," quickly became a classic. He could say it in anger, shock, or amusement, and each time it felt new. Over time, the phrase spread beyond the show and became a part of pop culture that fans used to react to anything surprising. But Frank had more than just one great line. His blunt wisdom came through in quotes like, "You're born, you go to school, you go to work, you die." That's Frank in a nutshell, funny, brutally honest, and somehow still endearing outside of the sitcom. In 2001's Monsters Ball, Boyle played Buck Rowski, a racist father dealing with his own problems. It was a stark contrast to his role as Frank Barron, but Boyle handled it with the same skill he used in comedies. His performance made the movie's themes of race and redemption even more powerful. He also played lighter roles like Father Time in 2002's The Santa Claus 2 and 2006's The Escape Clause, which brought him new fans and showed that he could entertain people of all ages. After his death, his last movie, All Roads Lead Home, 2008, about family and loss, was released as a tribute to his memory. It was a fitting tribute to a man who spent his career bringing characters to life, whether they were in comedies or dramas. In 1974, Peter Boyle met Lorraine Alterman while working on Young Frankenstein. She was a reporter for Rolling Stone who was at the set to interview Mel Brooks. Boyle, who was still in full Frankenstein makeup, saw her and asked her to go on a date, right then and there. It was a bold move because he looked like something about his confidence made her like him, and they started dating. 3 years later, in 1977, they got married, and John Lennon was the unexpected best man. Lorraine's friendship with Yoko Ono brought Boyle and Lennon closer together, and they became close friends. They talked, spent time together, and made a real friendship. Then, in December 1980, everything changed when Lennon was shot and killed in New York, just 2 days before Bo's daughter Lucy was born. Bo's life took a new turn in October 1990 while he was working on a movie in Salt Lake City. He had a severe stroke that left him unable to speak or move for almost 6 months. He was stuck in his own body and had to rebuild everything from the ground up. He went through speech therapy, fought to regain mobility, and slowly returned to AC/DC. It was a long recovery, but his determination got him back on the screen. Then, in 1999, something even scarier happened. While filming Everybody Loves Raymond, he started to feel weak and clammy and his chest hurt, but he didn't think it was anything serious. The show's executive producer saw that something was wrong and insisted that he go to the hospital. That decision may have saved his life. Boyle had a heart attack caused by a blocked artery. Doctors performed an angioplasty, and he was back on set in 2 weeks. The cast and crew, who had become like family to him, were shocked at how close they had come to losing him, but Boyle kept going. He played Frank Barron with the same sharp wit and energy until the show ended in 2005. In his later years, he fought multiple myeloma, a rare blood cancer. He kept his diagnosis a secret because he was afraid it would affect his ability to work while he was getting treatment. He kept acting and was in Santa Claus 3 in 2006, but his health got worse and he died on December 12, 2006, from complications related to the disease. His wife Lorraine made sure his memory lived on by starting the Peter Boy Research Fund in his honor. Every year, comedians like Ray Romano honor him with a KN of stand-up, turning laughter into a tribute for the man who spent his life making people smile. Peter Boyle played Frank Barron so well that people started thinking he was Frank. Fans would approach him expecting the same grumpy attitude they saw on Everybody Loves Raymond. Some made sarcastic jokes thinking he would respond with the same wit. Others invaded his space and talked to him like an old man. Boyle knew that this was part of fame, but it wasn't always easy. In real life, he wasn't at all like Frank. He was thoughtful, smart, and very private. The constant expectations of strangers made it hard to separate his real self from the character he had played for 9 years. His family felt the same way. His wife Lorraine Alterman Boyle and their daughters Lucy and Amy often had to deal with fans who saw them as extensions of Frank Barron. Strangers would talk to them as if they knew them, or they had a nice life thanks to Boyle's fame. But it also took away their privacy. Boyle loved his family very much, and it hurt him to see them lose their sense of normalcy because of his fame. The weight of being Frank Baroni never really left him. Boyle had an amazing career, starring in movies like Taxi Driver in 1976 and Young Frankenstein in 1974, and working with legends like Robert De Niro and Gene Wilder. But no matter what he had done before, people only saw him as Frank. He had spent decades showing that he could play any role, but it seemed like everyone had decided that he was only good at one thing. Boyle loved Everybody Loves Raymond, but he wanted to be known for more than one role. Even after the show ended in 2005, he kept getting offers to bring Frank Barron back. There were spin-offs, commercials, and guest roles that would have made him a lot of money, but he turned them all down because he didn't want to be Frank forever. He chose to try new parts, even though it meant turning down easy money. This showed what kind of actor he was. Money wasn't important, but his craft was. He had spent his whole life showing how talented he was, and he wasn't going to let one role define him.